Most people are too stupid to know they're stupid, and you probably are too. Right now, in this moment, you are confidently wrong about something. You have an opinion you are sure is correct, a belief you would defend, a position you think is obvious, and you are dead wrong. But you cannot see it, because stupidity is not just about lacking intelligence, it is about lacking the ability to recognize that you lack intelligence. And that inability, that is the whole problem. You cannot fix what you cannot see. You cannot learn what you do not know you are missing. You are trapped inside your own ignorance, and your confidence is the lock. If that pisses you off, if you were already thinking, "Not me, I am self-aware," then congratulations, you just proved the point, because every idiot in history believed they were the exception. Drop a comment if you have ever been confidently wrong about something and only realized it years later. Share this video. Force people to confront how often they are the idiot in the room without knowing it. Here's what nobody tells you about stupid people. They do not know they are stupid. And it's not denial, it's not arrogance, it's structural blindness. The skill required to recognize incompetence is the same skill they lack. You need intelligence to recognize intelligence. You need competence to see competence. And if you have neither, everyone looks the same to you. The genius and the moron, the expert and the fraud. You literally cannot tell the difference because you do not have the tools to measure the gap. Arthur Schopenhauer figured this out 200 years before Dunning-Kruger proved it scientifically. He watched it happen everywhere, in universities where mediocre professors spoke with absolute authority, in social circles where ignorant people dismissed brilliant ideas they couldn't even comprehend, in positions of power where fools made decisions affecting thousands of lives, completely unaware of how unqualified they were. And he documented the exact mechanism, not just that idiots think they are smart, but why they are psychologically, structurally incapable of ever realizing they are not. And here's the part that should terrify you. You are an idiot about something, maybe many things. You have areas where you are confidently incompetent, where you speak with certainty but lack expertise, where you have opinions but no real understanding. And the worst part? You don't know which areas those are, because if you knew, you wouldn't be an idiot about them anymore. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just apply to other people, it applies to you right now. The question is not whether you are ever stupid, the question is whether you have enough humility to recognize when. Here's the core mechanism Schopenhauer identified, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Intelligence requires the ability to perceive complexity, but perceiving complexity requires knowledge, which means if you were too ignorant to see complexity, everything looks simple. And if everything looks simple, you feel certain. This is what Schopenhauer called the fool's paradise, a state of blissful confidence created by complete ignorance of how much you do not know. You cannot see the depths because you've never been deep enough to know they exist. Surface level is all you see, so surface level feels like everything. Think about learning any skill: guitar, chess, programming, writing, philosophy. When you first start, before you have tried it yourself, you think, "This doesn't look that hard." You watch someone skilled and you genuinely believe you could probably do that too. It looks simple, straightforward, easy. Then you actually try, and you are terrible, humiliatingly bad. And suddenly you realize, oh, there's way more to this than I thought. There are layers I did not see existed, techniques I did not know existed, complexity I completely missed. That moment of realization, that is the beginning of actual competence, because now you can see the gap. You know what you don't know. You have felt the distance between where you are and where skill actually lives. But idiots never have that moment. They never progress far enough to see the complexity. They stay at the surface forever, looking at the skill from the outside, judging it based on what it looks like, not what it actually is. And because they never go deeper, they never realize how shallow their understanding is. They remain in the state of, "This looks easy," confident, certain, completely unaware that they are standing at the base of a mountain they cannot even see. To them, the whole thing looks like a small hill they've already climbed. Schopenhauer saw this constantly among his academic peers. Philosophers who had never studied deeply, who had never spent years working through difficult texts, who had never built rigorous logical arguments, would confidently dismiss entire schools of thought. Not because they examined those schools and found them flawed, but because they could not perceive the depth they were dismissing. To them, philosophy was just people sharing opinions about life. Simple, subjective, nothing complicated about it. They couldn't see the logical structures underneath, the epistemological frameworks, the centuries of refined argument, the careful distinctions between concepts that look similar but mean completely different things. All of that was invisible to them, so they felt perfectly qualified to have strong opinions based on almost no knowledge, and their confidence never wavered because they genuinely could not see what they were missing. The modern version of this is everywhere, and it has gotten worse. Someone reads a headline about economics. Now they are certain they understand monetary policy. They can tell you exactly what the Federal Reserve should do, why inflation is happening, how to fix the economy. Never mind that they have never studied economics. Never mind that they do not understand the models economists use or the trade-offs every policy creates. They read an article. They have an opinion. And that opinion feels just as valid to them as an expert's analysis, because they cannot see the difference. Someone watches a documentary about history. Now they can definitively explain why Rome fell, why World War I started, why civilizations collapse. They have a clean, simple narrative, a few key causes, a clear lesson. Never mind that historians spend entire careers studying these events and still disagree. Never mind that historical causation is incredibly complex, that every explanation leaves out a dozen other factors, that the more you study history, the more ambiguous it becomes. They watched a 2-hour documentary. They feel informed, and informed feels the same as expert to them. Someone listens to a podcast about psychology. Now they can diagnose everyone around them. They know why people behave the way they do. They can explain trauma, attachment styles, personality disorders, cognitive biases. They throw around terms like narcissist and gaslighting and projection with complete confidence. Never mind that they have never studied psychology formally. Never mind that diagnosis requires years of training and careful observation. They heard the concepts explained. They recognize the patterns. And recognition feels like understanding. This is the trap. They have surface-level information, but they cannot perceive the depths they are missing. So surface level feels complete, feels sufficient, feels like expertise. And they speak with the confidence of people who have studied for years while knowing almost nothing. And because they cannot see the gap between familiarity and expertise, their confidence never breaks. Schopenhauer wrote, "The person who writes for fools is always sure of a large audience." Why? Because fools cannot tell the difference between shallow and deep. To them, a complex argument and a simple assertion look the same. Both are just words on a page. Both are just ideas being expressed. They cannot perceive the difference in rigor, in evidence, in logical structure, so they choose the simple one, because it is easier to understand. And they mistake ease of understanding for truth. If I can understand it quickly, it must be right. If it requires effort to understand, it's probably just overcomplicating things. This is why clickbait works, why conspiracy theories spread, why confident idiots get bigger audiences than careful experts. Because the idiot's message is simple, clean, certain, no caveats, no nuance, no "it depends" or "in some contexts" or "the research suggests but does not prove," just clear, confident answers. And to someone who cannot perceive complexity, that clarity looks like truth, looks like intelligence, looks like someone who actually knows what they're talking about. The expert, meanwhile, sounds uncertain, speaks in qualifiers, says generally, and in most cases, and the evidence leans toward. And to the idiot, that sounds weak, sounds like the expert doesn't really know. Because the idiot cannot see that uncertainty is the language of actual knowledge, that anyone who understands complexity knows nothing worth understanding is simple, that real expertise always comes with doubt, Because the more you know, the more you see the exceptions, the edge cases, the contexts where the rule breaks down. Certainty is the language of ignorance. Nuance is the language of understanding. But idiots cannot hear the difference, so they trust the certain voice, and they dismiss the careful one as overthinking. Here's a pattern you've definitely noticed, but maybe never named. Someone has surface-level exposure to a topic. They read a few articles, watched some YouTube videos, heard discussions, scrolled through Twitter threads, and now they speak with the confidence of someone who has studied it for years. They do not realize that familiarity and expertise are completely different things, that knowing about something is not the same as knowing something. Schopenhauer called this the illusion of comprehension. You've heard the terms, you know the basic concepts, you can follow a conversation about it, so you assume you understand it. But there's a massive difference. Familiarity means you've been exposed to ideas. You recognize them when you see them. You can nod along when someone talks about them. Expertise means you can work with those ideas, apply them, test them, see where they break, know their limitations, know what they actually mean beyond the surface definition. Familiarity is passive. You absorbed information. Expertise is active. You wrestled with information until you understood it deeply enough to use it. And idiots cannot tell the difference, because to them, hearing about something feels like understanding. Think about how this plays out. Someone hears about Stoicism, reads a few Marcus Aurelius quotes on Instagram, sees some Ryan Holiday content, and now they're giving life advice based on Stoic philosophy. They talk about accepting what you cannot control, about focusing on your response rather than external events. They sound informed, they use the right words, but ask them anything deeper. What is the Stoic view on preferred indifference? How does Stoicism resolve the tension between fate and moral responsibility? What distinguishes Stoic ethics from Epicurean ethics? How do Stoics define virtue and why that definition matters? Blank stare, silence, or worse, they make something up that sounds plausible but is completely wrong because they don't actually understand Stoicism. They're familiar with some quotes, with some surface concepts, but familiarity feels like understanding, so they speak with confidence about something they barely grasp. Schopenhauer experienced this constantly in academia. Colleagues would mention his work in conversations, use his terminology, reference his ideas. He would think, oh good, they have read my work. Then they would say something that proved they completely misunderstood the fundamental premise. They were familiar with his ideas, they could name drop correctly, they could use the jargon in sentences, but they had not understood. They absorbed surface patterns without comprehending what those patterns meant, and they could not tell the difference. To them, being able to reference something was the same as understanding it. The modern explosion of this is social media. Everyone is familiar with everything. No one understands anything deeply. You scroll through content on neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, politics, economics, history. You see infographics, hear sound bites, absorb talking points, and that familiarity creates an illusion. I know about this. I have seen discussions about it. I have heard multiple perspectives, so I am informed. But knowing about something is not knowing something. Seeing debates is not understanding the subject being debated. Hearing perspectives is not having the expertise to evaluate which perspective is correct. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." But idiots hear opinions and think they have acquired facts. They see perspectives and think they have grasped truth, because they cannot distinguish between exposure and understanding, between recognition and comprehension. And that inability is what keeps them confidently ignorant forever. Here's why this matters, and why it is so hard to fix. When you mistake familiarity for expertise, you stop learning. Because why would you study something you already understand? Why would you invest time and effort into deepening your knowledge when you already feel like you get it? So you remain at surface level forever, consuming content, hearing ideas, feeling informed, while never actually becoming competent. And your confidence grows in proportion to your exposure, completely independent of your actual understanding. This is why idiots think they are smart. They have confused recognition with comprehension. They have heard about things, so they think they know things. They can participate in conversations, so they think they are qualified to have strong opinions. And their confidence grows with every article they skim, every video they watch, every tweet they read, because each exposure reinforces the illusion that they understand. The practice: before speaking confidently about something, ask yourself, could I teach this to someone else? Not just repeat what I have heard, but actually explain it in a way that builds understanding. Could I defend this position against expert counterarguments? Do I know what the strongest objections are, and do I have responses that hold up? Could I apply this concept in a novel situation I have never seen before? Can I use this knowledge, or do I just recognize it when I see it? If the answer is no, you are familiar, not expert. And familiarity should make you curious, not confident. Should make you want to learn more, not speak more. Intelligent people know the difference. Idiots do not. And that is why idiots are so loud, while experts are so quiet. Here's something Schopenhauer identified that is absolutely brutal. To recognize that someone is better than you at something, you need to be somewhat competent yourself. If you are completely incompetent, you cannot even perceive excellence. You lack the framework to recognize it. A child watching a chess grandmaster cannot appreciate the genius of the moves. To them, it's just pieces being moved around a board. The brilliance is invisible. A person with no musical training cannot distinguish a virtuoso from a competent amateur. They both sound good. The subtle differences in technique, in interpretation, in control, all of that is lost. They cannot hear it, not because they are not paying attention, but because they don't have the training to perceive what makes one performance exceptional and another merely adequate. This is what Schopenhauer called the competence threshold for recognition. You need baseline competence to recognize superior competence, which means if you are truly incompetent, everyone looks roughly the same to you: the expert and the amateur, the genius and the mediocre. You cannot tell the difference because you don't have the knowledge structure to perceive the difference. And this creates a devastating cycle. Because you cannot recognize excellence, you don't know what to aspire to. Because you don't know what to aspire to, you never develop the skill to recognize excellence. Because you never develop that skill, you remain unable to see the gap between yourself and actual competence forever. Schopenhauer saw this among philosophy students constantly. They would read Immanuel Kant, one of the most rigorous, systematic philosophers in history. Then they would read some random person's blog post about philosophy, and they would think both are just opinions about reality. Both are equally valid. Both are just different perspectives. They could not see that Kant built elaborate logical systems with internal consistency and carefully defined terms and responses to every obvious objection, while the blogger just shared unexamined assertions and personal feelings dressed up as insight. The difference in quality was enormous, but seeing that difference required philosophical training these students did not have. So to them, all philosophy looked the same, just people sharing their thoughts. The modern equivalent is everywhere, and it's maddening if you actually have expertise in something. Someone cannot tell the difference between a peer-reviewed scientific study and a blog post that references science, between an expert's careful analysis and a confident person's opinion, between a well-reasoned argument and a well-delivered speech, between someone who knows what they're talking about and someone who just sounds like they do, because they do not have the competence to see the distinction. The markers of quality are invisible to them. So when they produce low-quality work themselves, they genuinely think this is as good as what experts do. In their perception, it is the same. They are not being arrogant, they are being blind. Their incompetence is so complete they cannot see the gap between themselves and actual skill. Naval Ravikant talks about specific knowledge that cannot be taught in a classroom, knowledge that comes from experience, from deep study, from years of practice. And idiots cannot see specific knowledge. It is invisible to them. They see what everyone sees, surface patterns. They miss what experts see, deep structures, subtle distinctions, non-obvious connections. And missing it, they assume it does not exist. They think the expert is just doing the same thing they are, maybe with more confidence or better marketing. They cannot perceive that the expert is operating on a completely different level. Example: Someone writes an essay. It is poorly structured, uses fallacious reasoning, makes unsupported claims, ignores counter-arguments, has weak transitions. But to them, it looks just like the professional essays they've read. They cannot see the logical gaps in their argument, cannot see the lack of evidentiary support, cannot see how their conclusion does not follow from their premises, cannot see that they have not addressed the obvious objections, because seeing those flaws requires analytical skills they do not have. So they submit it with confidence, maybe even feel proud of it, while an expert reading it sees glaring problems on every page, structural failures, reasoning errors, gaps so obvious they're painful. The gap between their self-assessment and reality is massive, but they cannot perceive the gap, and that's the whole problem. That is what makes incompetence so durable. It protects itself. It cannot see itself, so it cannot fix itself. What this means, when idiots think they are smart, it is not delusion, it is not arrogance, it is blindness. They are genuinely unable to see how far they are from competence, because seeing that distance requires the very competence they lack. They are trapped in a perceptual prison built by their own limitations, and no amount of telling them they are wrong will help, because they cannot see wrong. To them, everything looks right. Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see." Add to that, idiots cannot even see that targets exist. They think showing up is the same as hitting the mark. They think participation equals excellence, and they have no framework to understand otherwise. But here's where it gets interesting, where the trap gets even more sophisticated. Some idiots are not confidently simple, they are confidently complex. They use big words, reference obscure concepts, construct elaborate theories, and because it sounds complicated, they assume, and others assume, they are being intelligent. Schopenhauer called this complexity as a substitute for depth, the belief that if something is hard to understand, it must be profound. But Schopenhauer knew better. Complexity can hide stupidity just as effectively as it can express intelligence. Actually, it's often better camouflage, because simple stupidity is obvious, everyone can see it. But complicated stupidity, that can fool people. That can sound impressive. That can pass for intelligence in environments where nobody actually understands the subject well enough to spot the fraud. Think about academic writing, business jargon, pseudo-intellectual conversations at parties. Someone says, "The paradigmatic instantiation of post-structural dialectics reveals the inherent contradictions in hegemonic discourse frameworks." And it sounds smart, right? Sounds like someone who knows what they're talking about. But strip away the jargon and you get, "Looking closely at modern ideas shows contradictions in dominant narratives." The complex version doesn't say more, it just says it in a way that is harder to parse, and that difficulty gets mistaken for depth. Schopenhauer was absolutely vicious about this among his contemporaries. He would read philosophical papers filled with technical terminology, elaborate sentence structures, references to obscure texts, complex grammatical constructions, and beneath all that complexity, often nothing. No actual insight, no new understanding, just familiar ideas dressed up in complicated language, obscurity masquerading as profundity. He wrote, "It is just as much a sickness to keep digesting knowledge in the mind without giving it any discharge in work as it is to eat much and not digest." These people consumed complex ideas but didn't digest them into understanding, so they just regurgitated complexity, thinking that's what intelligence looks like, thinking if they sound complicated, they must be smart. The modern version is TED Talks, corporate presentations, academic conferences. Someone delivers a presentation filled with neuroscience terminology they barely understand, frameworks they did not create, studies they cite but have not actually read, buzzwords that sound innovative: synergy, paradigm shift, disruptive innovation, neuroplasticity, quantum consciousness. And because it is complex and delivered confidently, audiences think this person is brilliant. This person knows something I do not. But ask them to explain the actual mechanism, to defend the position against expert critique, to apply it in a novel situation, and the facade collapses. Because they were not demonstrating intelligence, they were performing it, using complexity as costume. Marcus Aurelius cut through this perfectly. If you cannot explain something in simple terms, you do not understand it. Real understanding can toggle between complex and simple depending on who you are talking to, can be technical with experts and clear with beginners. Performed intelligence can only do complex because that is where the gaps in understanding can hide. How do you spot this? Ask someone to explain their complex idea simply, not dumbed down, not condescending, just clear. If they can, they understand it. If they cannot, if they just repeat the complexity in different words, if they say, well, it is complicated as a defense rather than as an accurate description, they are performing. They're using language they do not fully comprehend to create the impression of knowledge they do not have. Schopenhauer spent years simplifying profound ideas, making difficult philosophy accessible without making it shallow. His contemporaries criticized him for it. Real philosophy should be difficult to understand. Accessibility is for amateurs. But Schopenhauer knew that difficult to understand and deep are not the same thing. Sometimes the deepest truths are simple once you truly understand them, and complexity is often just confusion dressed up as sophistication. The person who cannot explain their idea simply does not understand it well enough, and they're using complexity to hide that fact from others and maybe from themselves. Here's the most frustrating trait Schopenhauer identified, and this is why arguing with idiots is completely pointless. You cannot correct an idiot, not because they refuse to listen, though many do, but because they do not have the framework to process correction. Correction requires you to recognize that you were wrong, which requires you to perceive the gap between your belief and reality. But if you cannot perceive that gap, you cannot be corrected. You'll just interpret correction as disagreement, as a different opinion, as someone else being wrong. Schopenhauer called this the closed loop of ignorance. Ignorance prevents you from seeing evidence. Not seeing evidence reinforces ignorance. You are trapped in a cycle you cannot break from the inside. The only exit is acquiring the competence that lets you see you were incompetent. But you cannot acquire that competence while you are convinced you already have it. So you stay trapped forever, confidently wrong, immune to correction. Think about the last time you argued with someone who was confidently wrong. You presented evidence, they dismissed it. That's just your opinion. You showed them data, they questioned the source. That study is biased, who funded it? You used logic, they didn't follow. You're overcomplicating it. The answer is simple. Every tool you used failed, not because the tools were bad, not because your argument was weak, but because they did not have the equipment to receive correction. It's like trying to send an email to someone who doesn't have an email address. The message is clear, the delivery method works, but they cannot receive it. They don't have the infrastructure. Schopenhauer experienced this constantly in academic debates. He would present carefully constructed arguments against his opponent's positions, multi-page analyses, precise definitions, clear logical steps, anticipation of objections, and they would respond with complete mischaracterizations of what he said, straw man fallacies, total misunderstandings. And when he pointed this out, when he said, "That is not what I argued," they could not see it, because seeing it would require the philosophical training they lacked. So they just doubled down, restated their misunderstanding with more confidence, because to them, they had responded to his argument. They could not see that they had responded to something he never said. The modern version is every internet argument ever. Someone makes a claim, you provide counter-evidence. They don't engage with the evidence, they just restate their claim, often in the exact same words. You point out the logical fallacy in their reasoning, they don't understand what a logical fallacy is, so they get defensive, think you are attacking them personally rather than critiquing their argument. You're speaking different languages, and they cannot learn yours because they don't know it exists. To them, an argument is just two people stating their opinions louder and louder until one gives up. The idea that there are rules of logic, standards of evidence, methods of reasoning, all of that is invisible to them. Naval Ravikant observed, "Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want." Apply this here. The desire to be right is a contract idiots make to never learn anything, because learning requires admitting you were wrong, and admitting you were wrong requires perceiving that you were wrong. And if you cannot perceive the gap between your belief and reality, you can never admit wrongness. So you never learn, you never grow, you remain confidently ignorant forever. And every correction, every piece of evidence, every logical argument just bounces off because you don't have the receiver. The mechanism works like this. Imagine someone who believes the Earth is flat. You show them photos from space. They say those are fake, CGI, Photoshop. You explain the physics of gravity, of planetary formation. They don't understand physics, so they dismiss it. That's just theory, not proven. You point to ships disappearing over the horizon, bottom first. They have an alternate explanation, perspective, the limits of human vision. You show them time-lapse videos of star trails. They say those are manipulated. Every single piece of evidence gets reinterpreted through their existing framework, because accepting the evidence would require abandoning the framework, and they cannot abandon the framework because it's the only one they have. It's how they make sense of the world. To give it up would mean admitting they were massively wrong about something fundamental, and they cannot handle that. So they protect the framework at all costs, reinterpret everything to fit. Dismiss anything that doesn't.
This is why Schopenhauer said, we forfeit 3/4 of ourselves in order to be like other people. But idiots have forfeited something else, the ability to change. They have locked themselves into their current understanding, welded the doors shut, and no amount of evidence can reach someone who has locked themselves in from the inside. You cannot break down the door. They have to open it themselves, and they will not, because they do not see a door. They do not see walls. To them, they are not trapped, they are right, and you are the one who cannot see clearly. What this means? You cannot argue someone out of a position they did not argue themselves into. If their confidence comes from ignorance, evidence will not fix it. Logic will not fix it. Data will not fix it, because they do not have the framework to process any of it. Schopenhauer knew this. Some people are unreachable, not because they're stubborn, not because they're willfully ignorant, but because they are structurally incapable of receiving correction. And spending energy trying to fix them is just frustrating yourself while accomplishing nothing. So here is what Schopenhauer would tell you about why idiots think they are smart. It is not arrogance, though it looks like arrogance. It is structural blindness. They do not know what they do not know. They mistake familiarity for expertise. They cannot recognize superior skill because they lack the competence to see it. They use complexity as camouflage for shallow thinking. They are immune to correction because they cannot perceive their own errors. And they surround themselves with people who reinforce their beliefs because disagreement feels like hostility to them. Each mechanism reinforces the others, creating an impenetrable fortress of confident ignorance. And here is what is brutal, what is almost tragic. They are not lying, they are not faking, they genuinely believe they are intelligent, because from inside their fortress, they cannot see outside it. The walls are too high, the blindness too complete, the feedback loop too tight. Schopenhauer wrote, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. But idiots? Idiots cannot even see that targets exist. They think existence is just wandering around, and they are doing it perfectly. They have no framework for excellence, no perception of skill, no awareness of depth. So they rate themselves highly because they have no standard to measure against, and they will argue with you about how smart they are with complete confidence, forever." Now here's the terrifying question, the one you've been avoiding this entire time. How do you know you are not one of them? Because every idiot believes they are intelligent. Every incompetent person thinks they are competent. Every fool is confident, including you, when you're being a fool. So how do you escape the trap? How do you avoid being the confidently wrong person you've been judging this entire video? Schopenhauer's answer is simple and brutal. Doubt. Intelligent people doubt themselves constantly. Not paralyzing doubt, not the kind that stops you from acting, but productive doubt. The kind that asks, am I sure about this? What might I be missing? Who knows more than me? What evidence would change my mind? What are the strongest arguments against my position, and can I respond to them honestly? Idiots never ask these questions. Their certainty protects them from doubt, feels like strength, feels like confidence. But intelligent people, they live in doubt, because doubt is the only antidote to comfortable ignorance. Doubt is what forces you to keep learning, to keep testing your beliefs, to keep checking whether what you think you know is actually true. Naval again, The modern devil is cheap dopamine. The modern angel is free education. Add this. The modern idiot is someone who chooses dopamine over education while calling it wisdom. Someone who watches YouTube videos and thinks they are learning, who scrolls Twitter and thinks they are informed, who listens to podcasts and thinks they are educated. Consumption is not learning, exposure is not understanding, and confidence based on shallow familiarity is just ignorance that learned to speak loudly. Here is the challenge, and this is not rhetorical, this is actual homework. Pick one thing you are confident about, really confident, something you would argue about, something you think you understand well. Now, spend the next week actively looking for the strongest arguments against your position, not the weak ones you can easily dismiss, the strong ones, the ones that actually make you uncomfortable, the ones that experts on the other side use. If you cannot find good counterarguments, you are not looking hard enough. And if you find them but cannot engage them honestly, cannot steel-man them before you respond, you are being an idiot about this topic. And that's okay. We all are about something. The question is whether you have the humility to recognize it. If this made you uncomfortable, if you felt defensive reading this, if you thought multiple times, but I'm not like that, good. That discomfort is your intelligence fighting your ego's desire for certainty. Listen to it, feed it, let it grow. Because Schopenhauer knew the wisest person is the one who knows how much they don't know. And the biggest idiot is the one who cannot perceive the depths of their ignorance. You are probably an idiot about something right now. The question is whether you are brave enough to find out. What?